I remember as a child standing among the trees and hearing the wind singing through their leaves. It seemed they were singing to me, and it also seemed natural to sing back, and so I did. I felt there was a divine spirit in the trees and in the earth, and as we sang to each other, the trees and I felt a kinship with them and a deep gratefulness to be part of this world. Later on, I earned my Ph.D. in biochemistry and molecular biology, and I discovered and learned about the wonders of the workings of the cell and the structure and function of DNA, and how this molecule encoded within it the generation of beings, from tiny amoeba to huge trees. And all of this only served to deepen my amazement at the natural world we live in, and to strengthen my belief that a spirit or energy flows through the universe and all its living beings. I also play the harp and love to share my music with others through music videos. Music has long been an important part of my life, and I associate it strongly with spirituality. Because of my research background, I became interested in what biological science and social science had to tell us about music and how it relates to our humanity. I'd like to share some of these discoveries and thoughts with you today. Come, let us listen to, enjoy, and ask questions about music and how it helps make us human.
Good morning. I'm Yvonne Duval, Director of Music, and I'm grateful to be joined by Dr. Susan T. Mashiyama. We welcome you to this virtual worship service of the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg. Because of the continuing danger of the pandemic, the building remains closed, but the church remains open. Today and every Sunday, there is a live virtual coffee hour from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. with breakout rooms for conversation. Please check your email and the website uchbg.org for details and updates. Please send your joy or sorrow via the link in the email you received in the announcement of today's service and indicate whether you give permission for it to be read in next week's service. If you are a visitor or newcomer, I invite you to explore uchbg.org to learn about the church and its many activities. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whomever you love, whatever you do for a living, you are welcome at the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg. I will now read you the lyrics for our opening hymn, number 343, A Firemist and a Planet, and I invite you to reflect on the meaning of the words before we sing this song together. A firemist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a starfish and a saurian, and caves where ancients dwelt, the sense of law and beauty, a face turned from the sod. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. Haze on the far horizon, the infinite tender sky, the ripe rich tints of cornfields, and wild geese sailing high. And over high and lowland, the charm of goldenrod. Some people call it autumn, and others call it God. Like tides on crescent sea beach, when moons so new and thin, into our hearts high yearnings come welling, surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some people call it longing, and others call it God. A century lone and frozen, a mother starved for her brood, and Socrates' dread hemlock, and Jesus on the rood, and millions who, though nameless, this straight, hard pathway trod. Some call it consecration, and others call it God. I invite those of you at home to light a chalice, a candle, or whatever you choose to use as your chalice at home.
firemist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a starfish and a saurian, and caves where ancients dwelt. The sense of law and beauty, a face turned from the sod, some call it evolution, and others call it God.
Haze on the far horizon, the infinite tender sky, the ripe rich tents of cornfields, and wild geese sailing high, and over high and lowland, the charm of goldenrod. Some people call it autumn, and others call it God. Like tides on crescent sea beach, when moons so new and thin, into our hearts our yearnings come welling, surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some people call it longing, and others call it God.
A century lone and frozen, a mother stored for her brood, and Socrates read hemlock, and Jesus on the rood, and millions through the nameless, the straight hard pathway trod. Some call it consecration, and others call it God.
Before we hear this morning's story, I would like to add a thought. This story doesn't mean that we need to be quiet and mannerly at all times, but rather seeks to illustrate how we can listen more deeply to each other when the time is right.
This is the story of the loud people of the frozen forest and the quiet people of the mountains of fire. Once upon a time there was a person named Snowflake who lived in a land called the frozen forest. People didn't know exactly why, but it just always seemed pretty unpleasant to visit there. Well, for one thing, the people of the frozen forest liked loud sounds. Maybe they thought that loud sounds made them feel warmer and more powerful. People even talked loudly at the same time when they had conversations, just cutting in and talking over the other person. Now Snowflake and Snowflake's friend Frost are going to show how the people of the frozen forest talked by waving their arms to show talking. Okay, Snowflake and Frost, please show quiet talking by waving your arms gently. Now, Snowflake, get louder. And now, Frost, you can't hear yourself, so you get louder. And you can guess what happens next. Yes, Snowflake gets louder, and then Frost, and then Snowflake, and so on and so forth, until both of them end up yelling at the tops of their lungs, and neither one of them could hear anything the other person was saying. Okay, cut. Thank you very much. When people in the frozen forest went to a concert, they would all sit down around an icy stage. Then the musician would come out. But as soon as the musician began playing, everyone would start talking all at once, very loudly. Okay, go ahead, everyone. The harp player would try to play louder and louder, but it was always so noisy that no matter how loudly the musician played, no one could hear it very well. And the people always went home a little dissatisfied. Now one day, Snowflake was visited by a friend, Torch, from the mountains of fire, a land where people were known for their quietness. The two went to a concert, and they sat around the frosty stage in the forest. But as soon as the musician came out and started to play, everyone started to talk at the tops of their lungs and make all kinds of loud noises. Now Torch from the Mountains of Fire thought that this was pretty ridiculous. Torch really wanted to hear the music, but could hardly hear it at all. So finally, Torch jumped up on stage, and flames began to shoot out of Torch's head. This happens when Mountains of Fire people become excited. The Frozen Forest people were so surprised to see this that they slowly became quieter and quieter as they continued to watch flames shoot out of the head of the Mountains of Fire visitor. One by one, they all stopped talking, and then stopped making any kind of noise altogether. And then a funny thing happened. Suddenly, they could hear the music pretty well for the first time. They were so amazed at this that they became even quieter, and they became quiet, not just on the outside, but also on the inside. And then, when that happened, they noticed that not only did the loud notes sound even louder and more powerful, and they really enjoyed that, but that even the quietest, most delicate musical notes felt loud and powerful when they made themselves quiet and still like that. That's because there are two ways to make things loud. The first is to raise the volume of the thing making noise, but the second way is to lower the volume of yourself, both outside and inside. After that, the Frozen Forest people were quiet at concerts, and they also started to take turns talking instead of shouting at each other at the same time. They found that they really liked being able to communicate so well, too. Have you ever seen talk shows where two people are yelling at each other at the same time and noticed that neither one of them can hear anything the other is saying? Well, I think that these people might have grown up in the frozen forest before they knew better. When we take turns and listen quietly, that's when we can really hear what people are trying to tell us. So, after this, instead of being known as a land of unpleasantness, the people of the frozen forest became known for their amazing concerts and their pleasant and polite ways of talking to each other, and became known as just a very nice place to be.
For our prayer, we will now hear Susan read the lyrics and translation of the traditional Guatemalan song La Paz de la Tierra, which is a blessing of peace. Following this, we will hear the song for our time of meditation and reflection.
I'd like to read to you now the words and translation of a traditional Guatemalan song, La Paz de la Tierra, or The Peace of the Earth. La paz de la tierra esté contigo, la paz de los cielos también. The peace of the earth be with you, the peace of the heavens also. La paz de los ríos esté contigo, la paz de los mares también. The peace of the rivers be with you, the peace of the oceans or seas also. La paz profunda cayendo sobre ti, deep peace falling down on you. La paz profunda creciendo en ti, profound peace growing in you. I invite you now to center yourselves in your seats with your backs straight and feel your feet on the ground, and imagine the peace of the earth, the heavens and the oceans, falling around you and growing within you. During this time of meditative reflection, I'll play a music video of this song that I created with our guitarist friend. Music and being. Music can move us to tears, help us to learn, call us to battle, and inspire us to dance with joy. As I did further reading on the subject, I was fascinated at what I'd learned about the deeper connection between music and being human, and I'd like to share some of this with you this morning. Music and the human brain. Researchers tell us that music is first processed in ancient parts of the brain that evolved in primitive times of our history. These parts of the brain are strongly involved in emotion, which may be why music can elicit such powerful feelings in us. The beat, or rhythm of music, is processed first through the cerebellum and amygdala, very old parts of the brain, rather than through the frontal lobes, which evolved more recently. Music processing by the brain also results in a mysterious phenomenon called synesthesia, or the production of one sense impression or stimulation leading to a different sense impression or stimulation. A perfect example is how listening to Chopin's Raindrop Prelude can make us visualize raindrops peacefully falling down onto a windowsill or pond and feel the cool of evening. Let me play this for you, and I invite you to notice what you see and feel. Did you see raindrops falling on a pond? Feel the cool, damp air? If so, you've experienced synesthesia. One interesting note is that a reason that we enjoy music is that music often has notes or beats that violate an underlying pattern. Yet, because these notes or beats that occur against the rules are not a threat to our safety, the frontal lobes of the brain perceive them as pleasurable. An expectation of the rule breakers builds anticipation, and when the rule breakers are encountered, a pleasurable reward reaction occurs. Music also just generally makes us feel good. Recent studies have pinpointed the release of the neurotransmitter dopamine as responsible for the intense pleasure that can be felt in response to music. Interestingly, alcohol, opiates, nicotine, and amphetamines also stimulate the release of dopamine, and this is a big reason that people abuse them. Wouldn't it be a better world if more people turned to music as their drug of choice? By using brain scanning technology, researchers found that activities such as reading or doing math problems each caused activity in a corresponding part of the brain. However, when participants listened to music, multiple parts of the brain lit up like little fireworks going off at once. And when people playing instruments were scanned, their brains had fireworks going off like a 4th of July jubilee. Playing music engages multiple parts of the brain at once, especially the motor, visual, and auditory cortices. Disciplined, regular practice of music that involves fine motor skills, in addition to visual and auditory processing, strengthens these brain functions, which can then be transferred to help in doing other activities and learning. Playing music involves both the left hemisphere of the brain, which dominates in linguistic and mathematical skills, and the right hemisphere that is used in creativity. Music makes us practice coordinating both hemispheres, making our brains become better and more efficient at communicating between the two halves through the bridge called the corpus callosum. and can allow us to become better problem solvers. And this all leads us to the next topic of learning and music. There is significant evidence that musical training helps us to learn. One study found that regardless of socioeconomic differences among schools, students in schools with superior music education programs scored 22% higher in English and 20% higher in math on standardized tests when compared to schools that had low-quality music programs. Nina Kraus, a neurobiologist at Northwestern University, explains how music helps in language development. She says that speech and music have three major commonalities: pitch, timing, and timbre, or tone quality. The brain processes both in very similar ways. Children who come from poverty often are actually unable to hear as many words by age 5 compared with other kids. The difference between ba and ga, for example, requires incredibly fast and precise processing by the brain. One thing that can help dramatically is music. Music trains and exercises children's brains to enable them to discern the subtle differences between words. Imagine hearing a static radio playing where you can't make out all the words, and this is what hearing might be like for a child from poverty. What we can give to children with early music opportunity and training is a gift of greatly increased clarity of perception. It should be noted that playing music alone does not make folks smarter. Just because you can play the Pathetique Sonata by Beethoven on the piano does not automatically give you knowledge of the chemical composition of DNA. You still have to study to gain knowledge. What music training does is to help the brain reach its full capacity to perceive, learn, and solve problems when it is called upon in study. And young people who have had music training do appear to use their increased ability in language and learning to achieve more academically. The Harmony Project in Los Angeles brought an after-school music program to children in low-income communities. While nearby schools had dropout rates of 50% or more, in schools with the Harmony Project music classes, 93% of their high school seniors graduated and went on to college. That's a difference between 50% and 93% made by high-quality music programs. It saddens me deeply when I hear of music programs being cut from schools. What is a more powerful equalizing factor when it comes to income inequality than a good education and ability to think? How much does it cost to set up children for failure when they can't discern as many words at the age of 5 as their wealthier classmates? And why would we deprive from children this basic human pleasure? I would ask us all to consider what a disservice it is to this country when we decide that music has little importance in children's development as human beings, and in contrast, what a gift it is that we give them when we work to ensure that music has a respected place in education. At this point, I'd like to play for you an instrumental version of one of my favorite hymns, The Firemist and a Planet, that we sang earlier. I'm especially fond of the first line because it expresses for me how music so beautifully intertwines love and reverence for nature and science, as well as the divine spirit we can find in both. I'll read you the first line again and then play the instrumental version for you. Just a note is that saurian is a large lizard, especially a dinosaur or other extinct form. Perhaps you could think of the meaning of the song as you listen to the music. The first line, again, is a fire mist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a starfish and a saurian, in caves where ancients dwelt. The sense of law and beauty, a face turned from the side. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. Healing. Let's talk now about music and healing. Music therapy has been shown in scientific studies to be effective at reducing depression, anxiety, and chronic pain, as well as being used to improve social functioning of people with schizophrenia. It can reduce heart rate, blood pressure, and levels of cortisol, the hormone that is harmful when released in large amounts due to stress. Also, music can heal because it can provide a powerful connecting experience, and having good social connections and social support have been shown to improve both physical and mental health. For example, blending our voices and singing together to create a larger whole is connecting by its very nature. Perhaps because music is processed in ancient parts of the brain and because music and language are so closely related, singing has been able to help people who have suffered from a traumatic brain injury to speak again. Patients who cannot talk, amazingly, retain the ability to sing. Music seems to be more deeply rooted in our brains than spoken words. Gabby Giffords, a former U.S. representative who suffered from a gunshot injury to the brain that destroyed her ability to speak, used music therapy where patients sing and gradually learn to drop the melody until just the words are left. She regained her speech, and 2 years later testified before a congressional committee. Social change. And now we come to the role that music can play in social change. In different countries, when thinking of war, an image of a trumpet, a drum, or a bagpipe inspiring the troops to battle may come to mind. Music can inspire people to fight, and yes, even to give their lives for a cause. In Ireland in the 17th century, musicians were considered so dangerous at fomenting anti-English rebellious spirit among the people that they were heavily persecuted by the English authorities. In the province of Munster, the Lord President issued a proclamation to the military to exterminate by martial law all manner of bards and harpers. Harpers are harp players. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth decreed, "Hang the harpers wherever found, and destroy their instruments." So I'm a harp player, and honestly, this seems a little extreme to me. Harpers are very gentle, but then I realized that this is a testament to the potential power of the seemingly gentle ability to touch the soul and inspire. Earlier, in 1596, it seems almost with a note of desperation that an English bishop of several regions of Ireland wrote, "Some strict order must be taken for idle persons, rhymers, bards, and harpers, which run about the country, eating the labors of the poor, carrying news and intelligence to the rebels, and bruiting or spreading false tales. Also, the rhymers make songs in commendation and praise of the treasons, spoilings, preyings, and beatings made. What power must have had these taunting songs about oppressors? Such a troublesome lot are musicians. I think this quote is wonderful in how it encapsulates so well the seemingly contradictory image we often have even today of musicians, and also poets, one might add, as idle, ne'er-do-well troublemakers who yet can be deadly agents by their power to inspire and incite large numbers of people to social movements and rebellion. And who can forget Pete Seeger? In Pete's view, where folk music exists, so does community. And where community exists, there also exists a force capable of creating political change. I agree with his statement that there's a lot of good music in this world, and if used right, it may help to save the planet. Spirit. Finally, what about music and the spirit? The dictionary defines spirituality as relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul, as opposed to material or physical things. From the dawn of humanity, from primitive chanting and drumming to elaborate choir and orchestral pieces for church, music has been an integral part of spirituality. Many people describe their deepest spiritual experiences as involving music. Can you think of something that's related to music that moved you to a deep spiritual experience? I wonder. There is little scientific evidence today to explain this connection, but here are a few possible reasons for this. As we have seen, music has the ability to simultaneously engage multiple parts of our brain, evoke multiple sensations, memory, and thought, and transport us to a higher level of experience. Songs allow us to express beautiful intent, meaning, and joy behind words that are important to us, and combining this with music greatly magnifies and uplifts their beauty and effect. It seems worth noting that to combine words with music is, as far as we know, an ability that belongs solely in the realm of being human. I think that it's no wonder that music allows us to be more human and to connect with and express the divine spirit that exists within us. As evidenced by its place in ancient regions of our brain and by its integral role in human culture from the beginning of our history, music is a necessary part of what it means to be human. Experiencing and creating music benefits our health, is critical for helping developing young brains fulfill their potential, and calms and nurtures our soul. It also just makes us feel good. And unlike another source of pleasure, food, it won't cause you to gain even an ounce in weight. When we consider the role of music in terms of social justice and addressing income inequality, perhaps we could ask ourselves, is there something we can do to help ensure that children are provided with quality music programs? I would leave you with this thought this morning. If early music opportunities resulted in the young people of this country becoming calmer and more mindful, and encouraged them to develop into more perceptive and spiritual human beings, I wonder, how could this change the world?
The church will donate this month's full offering to the Joshua Group. In 2014, the Joshua Learning Center opened on Allison Hill, where they offer an array of cradle-to-career educational programs and services for over 200 low-income children and families from the neighborhood. They have continued operating through the pandemic with added safety measures and remain an important educational resource to residents of Allison Hill. Thank you for your generous support.
As we go forth in the world today, let us have a new awareness of the important place that music has in our lives, in helping us to learn, to grow, and to get in touch with and express our spirituality. Even those who have lost their hearing say they can feel and enjoy the vibration of music. Let us hear and feel the music in the trees, and in the rain, and in the soft wind, and within all of us. Let us share it with others and help bring peace. May it be so.
Wondrous love is this, oh my soul. What wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of bliss to send His precious peace to my soul, to my soul, to send His precious peace to my soul. He wings terrorist fly. We will sing.